Hello. Welcome back, everybody. So, to my channel, if you're new here, hello. If you're not new here, if you are repeat viewers, hello also. Basically, hello to everyone, all the same. Anyway, I hope that this video is gonna be a short one because I'm going to sleep soon. But I thought I just kind of want to talk about one book. I already finished 3 books actually, including this one, The Late Bourgeois World by Nadine Gordimer, and the other 2 books that I've already finished were Kevin Chen's Ghost Town, translated from Chinese and Taiwanese to English by Darryl, Sterk, and also The Gate to Women's Country by Sherri Tepper. The Gate to Women's Country was something that I finished like last night, and yeah, that book was something, and I want to make a video about that book, but you know, not this time. In this one, I want to talk about The Late Bourgeois World, which I finished, I think, a few weeks ago. It's a very, very short book. This book was published in 1966, and this would be my second book by Nadine Gordimer. So, FYI, Nadine Gordimer was a writer from South Africa, and I think she won the Nobel Prize, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, that's that. Anyway, The Late Bourgeois World was a very intriguing book, I would say. This book is about the kind of like the aftermath of the suicide of one particular man named Max van den Zandt, who was a white revolutionary fighting against apartheid in South Africa during the apartheid era. And we sort of follows like what happens after his suicide through the narration of his estranged ex-wife named Elizabeth or Liz van den Zandt. And as we would eventually later learn, Max committed suicide after he was kind of like after his incarceration due to his involvement in the anti-apartheid activism. And during his incarceration, he did something that was kind of, you know, not productive towards his cause. Basically, he gave out information under duress. But throughout this novel, we begin to learn like what kind of a person Max is. But we would also eventually learn, you know, because this book is narrated through the point of view of Max's ex-wife, Liz, we would also eventually learn what's happening to Liz after this suicide. Like, at the beginning we see how Liz receives the news of this suicide, but eventually Liz is going to have to face a particular choice that is kind of interesting to the plot, to the suicide, to the whole anti-apartheid cause. And the way that this book approaches this choice that Liz has to make would also be quite interesting as well. Yeah, so what I thought about this book, you know, I'm laughing because I'm thinking about, you know, describing this book as interesting again, and obviously my vocabulary is like it feels so limited at this point. But anyway, yeah, let me just start by one of the most fascinating thing I found about this book is that and this was something that I kind of noted was how, you know, it was how the character Max is portrayed in this novel. So right from the get-go, right, the description at the back of this book, it says here, Liz Fondensan's ex-husband Max, an ineffectual rebel, has drowned himself. In prison for a failed act of violence against the government, he had betrayed his colleagues. Okay, so that's like the first paragraph of the description of this book at the back here. And already we kind of have the impression, or at least I have the impression, that Max, this character, is someone who is kind of pathetic, or, you know, as, you know, based on, you know, according to, I would say, modern kids parlance, Max is lame. It is, you know, he is described as ineffectual, and I feel like this part is really interesting because it immediately shaped how I view this character in this book. Already we are primed, or okay, I don't want to use we. I was primed to think that Max is this kind of character who is just kind of, you know, not awesome, all right? He was a rebel, he was an activist, but he failed. Okay, but what's up with that, you know? While I was reading this book, Max as a character does not really... he is not really present in a very tangible capacity. You kind of feel like, because this book is narrated through the point of view of Liz, who was divorced from Max, that Max just feels like a ghost in this book. The whole thing, except for the, you know, the parts with the flashback narrated by Liz, the present part happens after the suicide of Max, and so we don't really see like Max being like a character that physically sort of appears in front of us, figuratively. And so we don't really get so much sense of agency as to, you know, who Max exactly as a character, except through the narration of Liz. And because of what has happened to Liz's marriage with Max, Liz is like, she is left with a son, and at the same time Max is also described as an absent husband and father. Liz does not have very high opinion about Max, not as a husband, not as a father, not as a person, not as an activist. So we hear a lot of like descriptions of Max being negative. And not only this book, the description of this book already primed me to think of Max as this kind of such and such person, but now we have this narration through this point of view of this bitter character that really kind of strengthens what I could feel about this character of Max. And I feel like it's really interesting because this book, it really makes me, it really tries to lead me to feel a certain way about this character. And it became kind of obvious to me as I was reading it, and I thought, what exactly is going on in here? But I also just kind of want to add that I don't think this book is trying hard to paint Max as a particularly negative character, and I think it's just one of the interesting stylistic trick that this book uses, which I think is just, it makes it a really fun book to read. So we face this kind of story where the bias is really strong against a certain character, and I just thought, what if there is so much more to that character beyond what is being presented? And I you know, and that aspect of this book just kind of something that I find really interesting. So if you have read this book, what do you think about that? Yeah, did you feel the same way, you know? So yeah, that's one thing that I thought was kind of noteworthy about this book. So the second part that I just thought was kind of interesting, you know, especially as a 21st century reader. I kind of enjoyed how this book interrogates this idea of being socially conscious, being a social activist, fighting towards something or fighting for a certain cause, especially causes that concerns marginalized groups, while still being the member of the privileged group. And I think this is something that this book sort of kind of talks about and raises questions about. So Max, as a character in this book, he's white, he's South African of British descent, I think, and the wife Liz is also the same, like both of them are white. And Max in particular, he has an interesting family pedigree. Like his father was a politician who obviously does not side with Max politically. And it's just kind of interesting because that informs this character's choices on what he would do, like how he would handle his activism and all that, and it also kind of influences his outlook on certain things. And at the same time, I also think that all of these, because Liz is also belongs to the to the more privileged class of people, that also shapes how she views this whole thing related to social activism, related to apartheid, related to revolution. And we as readers would eventually learn where Elizabeth or Liz stands. But it's just really interesting that this book kind of presents as one of the possible scenarios how a person's personal background or personal upbringing can come into conflict with whatever cause that a person is trying to fight for. And I feel like it's something that is, very relevant and timeless. And I think, especially today, where with the internet, I think so many people are able to just kind of like fancy themselves as being activists or activist adjacent, or at least being socially conscious through the use of the internet. And it's really obvious that when one wants to work for a certain cause, it takes certain effort, right? But somehow, this idea of being socially conscious often just sort of feels kind of diluted by people who think that just because they do this and do that, and that's it, and they can feel like they are solving the world's problem or something like that, when in fact, like, the actual work takes much more effort. And and that's just one aspect of working on social change. Obviously there are much more nuance associated with that. And so I feel like this book, just kind of reading it, just kind of makes it feel very relevant to what we can observe in today's day and age. So I thought that was kind of interesting as well. yeah, did I mention that this book was published in 1966? So that was like 60 years ago, a long time ago. But maybe not too long, you know, it was just 60 years ago. People who are 60 years old are probably going to be offended. Just kidding. Anyway, yeah, let me know if you have read this book. Let me know if you have read any of her other books as well. I am very interested in reading more of her book, more of her books. I read July's People, but that was like many years ago, and I don't really remember what that book was about, but I remember it being quite fascinating. There was something kind of alternate history-ish about it, I think. But I don't remember the plot details. But I thought it was very interesting, and I enjoyed this one. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. And yeah, let me know if you have any recommendations related to this book that that sort of discusses similar details or topics, themes. And I think that's all I want to talk about in this video. Let me know if you have any other things you want to mention about this book that I didn't say, because you know, I really love hearing about what people just kind of think about, like some of the books that I mention in my single book videos. I often receive comments like that came years after I published you know, that video. It's a really interesting experience to see those comments, also coupled with the fact that, you know, when those comments came, I would feel kind of silly because those videos were made like many years before. And I must say, for the most part, I sounded pretty cringy many years before. Not to say that I don't sound cringy now, but yeah, I like to imagine myself that I sound less cringy. But maybe I still do sound cringy. Anyway, that's all for this video. I hope y'all have a great day ahead, and I'll see you again in future videos. So until then, take care. Thanks for watching, and bye.